I'm a pop culture tragic. It's true, isn't it, Dean? Star Wars or Star Trek? I say both. I could talk to you about the Lord of the Rings for hours on end, and I will if you let me. I'm a pop culture tragic, and I want to suggest to you that for people of a certain age, like about this age, by the way, I feel a bit of pressure this morning. I do take digressions. I hope that's okay. This is supposed to wrap up the Thought Matters conference while also being accessible to the good people of the Parramatta Corps. And it's supposed to, ideally, you'd like it done in 15 minutes, right? You'll tolerate 25, but you at least want it to be moderately interesting. I feel a lot of pressure to try and summarise everything we've heard in the last 2 days and to do it in a way that meets your expectations and gets you off in time. If there are any complaints about my failure to do any of that, they can be sent to mark.campbell at salvationarmy.org.nz. Won't be the first time he's had emails about me. Anyway, thank you, David. Thank you, band, for that beautiful piece of music. Music is important, and I say that I'm a pop culture tragic because I believe there is music that we don't need to hear much of before we know what we're dealing with. So, da 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 da. What is it? Star Wars, right? 1977. You young people don't understand. If you're a movie buff, if you're into sci-fi or any of that kind of thing, you just hear the notes and you know what it is. If you're a classical music buff and you hear da 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 da, da 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 da, you know what we're doing. You know what we're dealing with. You know that we're right into the guts of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. If you were parents of children in the early to mid 2010s, around 2013 in fact, and if you ever heard the words, let it go, you know you're in for a world of pain. If you are a brass band tragic and you hear the notes, dum 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 da 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 dum da 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 dum 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 da. Do you want me to sing the whole 12 minutes? Yeah. You know that this is one of the all-time classics of Salvation Army brass banding. Came into the world in the 1960s and popularised in the 1970s, The Present Age by Leslie Condon. It leverages off a line in a hymn by Charles Wesley, which we've already heard, to serve the present age, my calling to fulfill. The present age, we've already heard a snippet of it. It tells the story of a young Christian setting out to win the world for Jesus, to serve the present age, to my calling to fulfill, oh, may it all my powers engage to serve my master's will. And this young Christian, above all things, is so certain of their calling, so certain of themselves, so certain of their capacity to win the world for Jesus. Too certain, in fact. The opening and the first statements of the tune are bold and almost arrogant. I'm taking this, by the way, from the composer's own notes upon the piece. Almost arrogant in their impatience and in their demanding and overpowering energy. If only the world would listen to me, it would surely be won. But the world, in the story that this piece is telling, is not convinced. It treats this young Christian with indifference, seeing them as irrelevant to its concerns, and the mood darkens with frustration and uncertainty. So more quietly and less certainly, they reaffirm their vow to serve the present age. But the world is again unmoved. It is mocking in its rejection. And the young pilgrim is almost overwhelmed with the horrors and hatreds of the world around them. And almost in despair, they turn to the chorus that says, I'll follow thee, of life the giver. I'll follow thee, suffering Redeemer. I'll follow thee. They never quite get there. The words, deny thee never, are missing from the music. Our pilgrim is caught in doubt, in uncertainty. Twice they are unable to finish the thought, and we're left hanging without resolution before the mocking world again weighs in with its anger and suffering and rejection. Alone and lost and now completely uncertain, our young Christian reaches for the words of the song that says, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul. It's a beautiful and simple and yearning musical arrangement that speaks of profound searching and deep faith that's not demanding, not convinced of itself, but instead convinced of the one in whom faith is placed. Whatever my lot, whatever my burden, whatever my loss, whatever my doubt, whatever my fear, whatever my feelings of futility and rejection and frustration, here is the one in whom I can be well, in whom I can dwell, in whom I can be found. Which leads to a form of certainty, a renewed sense of calling to fulfill, to serve this present age. And we're left with a sense of bright hope built around the words, courage, brothers and sisters, do not stumble. For more than 50 years, this piece has been a classic of the Army Band. It's stirring. I'm so disappointed you didn't get the chance to play it. I have played this piece, and I need to tell you, I spent at least a third of it bluffing. You know that thing you do when you just wiggle your fingers and hope for the best. But I'm so disappointed for you that you didn't get to play it. And if you like, we can at a territorial level bring some pressure to bear upon the Australia Territory to ensure that we correct that wrong. I'm not going to do that. It's a stirring, emotive, bold, fearful, and in the end, it's a song of victory that stirs the heart, and it is deeply, deeply theological in a way that I want to trouble this morning. The conference of which you've either been a part or are now, of which you've unwittingly become a part this morning, asks, what should we, the saints of God, be as a people in the world? What is the ecclesia, the gathering, the assembly of people? It's not about a church. It's not about a location. It's about who are the people of God? How are we to be? What is the identity and purpose that will mark us as we live out our faith with purpose together? Look, for many in our countries, the reality is that the church they are familiar with is a church that seems utterly certain of itself and its insistence that the world is to be one for God and run according to God's rules. For many believers, there is no room for doubt. Faith is being confident of what we hope for. It's being assured of what we do not see. And sometimes, when the world treats us with indifference or mocks us or ignores us, we double down on certainty. To believe is to think these things. To belong is to agree with these truths and reject all others. All we need is to read the Bible and pray, to gather together, and we will be vindicated. This is the confidence of modernity, a period in human existence that was really predicated on the idea that there is certainty to be had. Every question has a definitive answer. This is a long-term certainty of the church that every issue has a yes or a no, a black or a white, an in or an out. The only problem is that this certainty has increasingly been overwhelmed by a growing realization that it does not account for the fullness of the human experience. We see this in Scripture. We move from a view of faith that tells us, in the words of Psalm 1, that those who delight in the Lord will be blessed in this life, and the wicked will be blown away like chaff, to the realization that life isn't that neat. In Psalm 73, we're reminded that the wicked sometimes seem to be doing pretty well. James and John and their books in the New Testament both counsel against an easy certainty. Jesus says that sometimes bad things happen to people for no discernible reason. Not everything has an easy answer. Not everything can be explained in spiritually satisfying terms. It's not just that the world is indifferent to the things of God or that it's mocking of faith. It's also that the simple answers we were sometimes taught in years gone by don't always stack up. And when this certainty, this belief that it's either one thing or the other, is shaken, we have seen people leave the church. There's no question that the institutional church in the Western world appears to be in numerical decline. Something is going wrong with the certainty that we've constructed. And we have a choice. Do we look for someone to blame? Do we look for something to pin it on? Do we stick with what we know, or do we genuinely ask that if we are to serve this present age, what is the calling we are to fulfill? Who is it we are to be? Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher and theologian with whom you're all intimately familiar, hated the phrase, the present age. Hate's a strong word. He wasn't fond of it. He wrote a whole book about it. For him, to describe the present age allowed us to treat the world as something abstract, something from which we are to some degree removed. It allowed us to talk about the world in theory, to build a faith constructed on ideas rather than on actual actions in actual communities. In defence of Charles Wesley, I'm acutely aware of the presence of Wesleyan scholars in the room who will no doubt correct me afterwards at length and in excruciating detail. The words of Charles Wesley's hymn are framed in poetic terms, but they could be understood about serving a present age, a world that is in some measure a theoretical construct, an idea about what things are like rather than the messy reality that we experience every day. And this is an important point, because a church content to simply talk about principles with which we must agree is a church that seeks a certainty that will always fail. We all know how our certainty can be shaken when we have a close relationship with someone going through something difficult or outside the boundaries of what we assumed the truth to be. We do not live in principles. We live real lives alongside real people in a complex real world. It's striking when we read Scripture how much of it deals not just with ideas or beliefs or principles or just believe this and you'll be fine. It deals with what it means to live well as whole people. People who are transcendent and spiritual, but also fully embodied, deeply emotional and intellectual, deeply relational. People who live in all these dimensions. To be human is to be grounded in a world that is messy and unpredictable and sometimes uncertain. As we were reminded in the conference by a paper dealing with the complex systems that make up the reality of human life in today's world. Our conference has posed plenty of questions. Papers on AI, on the church as an intergenerational community, on what it means to include or make space for genuine differences while holding to a deep commitment to working out how to live with and for one another. What does the Bible have to say about artificial intelligence or cutting-edge technology? What does it mean to be created in the image of God? What does it mean to say, and I'm quoting, that the purpose of religion is to create community? Or that hospitality is offered when we welcome someone else into a space that is important to us? When we speak of inclusion, do we mean it? When we say that we are called to the least, the lost, and the last, do we mean it? When we say that we serve our King and not our own ideas or interests, do we mean it? When we see that the world is changing, are we brave enough to ask if our understanding of the gospel has been too small? Or if we must be prepared to change? Not change for change's sake, Casey, wherever you are. But at times, do we need to change our minds? Not to abandon what we have, but to build up new things, new ideas, lay hold of new tools and dare to try and fail and try again in order to speak hope into the chaos around us. For those of us who lead in the army, are we brave enough not just to say we must lead in new ways and put more agency in the hands of others, but to actually follow through? When we're sitting in the meetings where decisions are being made and it gets tough, will we have the courage of our convictions or allow the same old patterns to emerge because it's what we know? Man, on Friday, there was a glorious cloud of witnesses sitting in this building here. Some of them work for the army. Some of them come here day after day because they have been welcomed in. One man left shouting, angry. And that messy humanity mingling together in this space was uncertain, but it was good. It was messy, but it was deep. It was the children of God. It was deeply embodied. There was nothing theoretical about it. It was deeply spiritual, but a kind of spirituality not just focused on heaven, but a spirituality that bleeds into the world and shapes the people of God in a way that is utterly beautiful. I'm minded of encounters I've had in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with a young man who came to the Salvation Army for help in one of our provincial centres. And he came back the next day, not for help, but because he said, I've never been treated like this before. I've never been taken this seriously. I've never been valued like this. This isn't the language he used. And his language was considerably saltier. But he kept coming back because he had found a place where he was welcomed in. Not tolerated, not treated as a client, treated as a person. He now works for the Salvation Army, helping people, treating them like people when they front up for assistance. We've heard, we've talked about brass banding this morning. We're all familiar with the Just Brass program. I recently went to the 10th anniversary of the Just Brass program in Otatahi Christchurch in New Zealand. And what was striking was the kids were being taught music. It was great. But it was what happened around that. The number of people from the Corps who were engaging with those children and their families every time they turned up. The relationships that were being built, the value that was being placed. Every story, whether it be what happened here on Friday or what happened back in New Zealand, every story is unique, but all shaped by grace in place of judgment, by faithfulness in place of fear, and every one of those stories changes the body of Christ. The present age was written using well-known hymns of the time in which it was written. And like its conclusion, with its slightly naive idea that our previous certainty can simply be remade, some of those hymns, along with some of the worship songs we sing today, can take us away from being the people of God fully engaged in the world to which we are called and point us to simply singing about God, or looking to leave this world in favour of some abstract spiritual realm. Even Wesley's hymn, and this is where, Glenn, you can correct me later, even Wesley's hymn speaks of fitting our never-dying soul for the sky. There's a sense of being taken out. It speaks of fulfilling our calling without ever quite pinning down what that really means. How Great is a God is a song I love to sing, and it's an offering of praise, but it does not speak to the human condition or who we are to be. Look, we need to praise. We rightly spend time simply adoring our God, but we need to lift our eyes to God. We need to seek the source of hope. We need to know there's something more to this life. But we also need to think about how we live out this faith into which we enter. We need to embed it, to embody it, to serve God by understanding this age and living as agents of the God who is love within it. What do I mean? Because often our deepest theology is the theology we sing, right? So what do I mean? I want to give you a couple of examples from a singer named Savannah Locke. You haven't heard of her. She's not terribly well known. You're not singing her songs. But I want to show you some of her lyrics and look for how she embeds faith in living, how she weaves the language of Scripture in without allowing it to simply be ideas that lend themselves to an easy but abstracted certainty. Let's have a look at the first one here. Do you want me to read it out? Can you read? Jesus, I want to know your heart. I want your perspective to be formed in my life. I want to be aware of the goodness you're doing in the world, how you're moving in me. My love, my life, my treasure, you hold me together. Jesus, you're the center of it all. In you I have being, hope, meaning. Jesus being the center of it all is not just about allegiance. It's about what changes in us. The next song, behold the Christ, fullness of the divine dwelling among us. Behold his flesh, vulnerable and powerless among us. Born to a girl you wouldn't look twice at. Came from a town that you'd probably drive past. This is deeply embodied theology. It's an upside down thing for an upside down king. Behold his flesh broken by the violence inside us. Came here to serve the least and the lowly, not to protect the self-proclaimed holy. Every time I hear that line, I'm like, ouch. Is that me? His love is a feast, a table where all have a seat. It's an upside down thing for an upside down king, where the first become last and the last become first. The rich are humbled low, the poor will never thirst. Love and justice work in harmony, heralding his peace. It's the kingdom of Christ the King. The band piece played for us this morning, be still my soul, the Lord is on thy side, bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. That's not fatalism, just accept it. It's a trust that works itself out in the real world and not in theory. The other song we sometimes sing to that tune says in the third verse, I've actually got a songbook here. Let's just take a moment to acknowledge the presence of the Salvation Army Cycling. I had to bring it from New Zealand. Do you have them here? The third verse says, I would bring peace to lives now torn asunder, ease aching hearts with words that soothe and heal. I would bring peace when breaking like the thunder, people rise in war and hatred feel. Peacemaker, Lord. This is consequential worship. It isn't about certainty, it's about faithfulness. It's not about succeeding in our holy calling, it's about the fruit we bear. It's a call to live a whole life, not one in which our everyday living and our spiritual experience are somehow separate things. One of our speakers shared about an Indigenous salvationist who observed that faith is not about going to church once a week and picking up a bit of spiritual for the week, because the spiritual is what we do all the time. We need to claim that. We need to claim the bold statement in Galatians 5 that the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Because look, if there's one theme that's bound all our papers together, papers on AI, the place of children, metamodernism, faith-informed practice and social work, the lived experience of ordinary people living grace-filled lives. If there's one theme that brings it together, it's that for all that's changed and is changing in the world around us, what is unchanging is the words of Jesus that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and to love your neighbour as you love yourselves. In fact, he goes so far as to say all the law, all the prophets is summed up in these things. Not loving them in theory, not simply feeling warm feelings and making sure we can tick the right doctrinal boxes. It's not that doctrine is not important, but it is that faith must be embodied and experienced and lived out. I believe the primary marker of the ecclesia, the assembly of God's people, must be love. I'm going to read some very familiar words from 1 Corinthians 13, but I want to ask you to hear them as though for the first time. I'm also changing them slightly. I hope that's all right. It's a paraphrase. Hear them for the first time, and hear them as though they should actually make a difference to who we are together and how we live. They should not be ideas. They should be practical instructions for the lives of the ecclesia. Things we should not just believe, but actually do in all the small encounters of our everyday. Because brothers and sisters, we can know all things, but if we have not love, we're empty. We can understand AI and all its consequences, but if we have not love, what is the worth of that? Love is only ever real when it is lived out. It is patient in the face of frustration. It is kind in the face of anger and misunderstanding. It does not envy. Oh, I want what you have. It does not boast, see what I can do. It is not proud. It does not hold that we are somehow worthy of more value or dignity or inclusion than those who are different to us. It doesn't dishonor others. It doesn't act from self-interest. It doesn't keep a record of wrongs so that we can keep holding something against someone and feel justified in doing it. It doesn't say that anything goes. It doesn't flirt with moral grey areas. It rejoices in the truth, in that which is right and good. It protects those who need protection. It trusts and hopes and perseveres, even when our love is not returned. It never fails. Love changes the one who is loved, but it also changes the one who loves. It is an act of transformation and of radical practical grace, not a transaction. One of our speakers suggested we should stop looking for black and white answers, the certainty of the young pilgrim in the band piece, The Present Age. I would add that likewise we shouldn't seek to live in a world of grey, which is really a kind of re-certainty that just allows for a little more nuance. Instead, as our speaker said, we can live with curiosity. We can commit to an ecclesia marked by a shared commitment of love to one another, and as agents of grace, discover that we are living in God's world of vibrant colour. So what are we to do? Firstly, I want to encourage you, think. Don't settle for what you think you know. Think, and think about your thinking. Seek truth infused with mercy and compassion. Seek justice. Seek the presence of God and let it change you. Embrace the whole of the ecclesia. We are to be marked by love. Liz and I were corps officers in a corps where we were talking with the leadership team one day, and they were saying, oh, look, we're really good at loving people here. And we had to respond honestly and say, that's true. You're really good at loving the people who are kind of like you. But you never quite know what to do when someone different walks in through the doors on a Sunday morning. I wonder if that should challenge us. I genuinely found beautiful the example here in the cafe on Friday. It was just people. People who all were welcome to belong. I was inspired, John and Henry and the help that you were giving us as we were setting things up. It was just inspiring to be in your presence and hear your joy about your role and your inclusion in the work of God here in Parramatta. Embrace the whole of the ecclesia. Be faithful even when we're uncertain. And consider the fruit of the Spirit. What is emerging from my life and from our life together? One of our speakers suggested that salvationist spirituality must be dynamic. It must act, it must produce fruit, it must be responsive, not static. It must be missional. It must reach out to transform through the love of Christ made real in us and through us. And it should be open. We don't tolerate people's culture or sense of self prior to conversion and then expect them to become like us. We seek grace, not certainty. I don't mean we shouldn't seek truth, but truth and certainty are not exactly the same thing. The world is too chaotic to expect that we won't have differences. The Bible is too hard to interpret with the degree of certainty we sometimes want, because we are bringing our own experience, our own capacity for thought, our own faith tradition. The world we live in, we are bringing that to an ancient text. We shouldn't be surprised when sometimes different emerges from how we read it. The Bible itself embraces tension and difference. Why wouldn't we? But above all else, love. Some people tie themselves in knots to explain love in a way that protects our ability to tell some people they don't truly belong. But love has to mean something more generous, right? We began our worship this morning by singing, "We were the beggars, we were the prisoners," but there are still beggars. There are still prisoners. Who are we to exclude those who demonstrate the fruit of the Spirit in their living? Love the street people, love the unclean, love the person who serves you in the supermarket and the person who cuts in front of you in traffic. Above all, love each other. Because the thing that will mark the ecclesia is the love we have for one another, the love that Christ demonstrated for us. Open your arms and let us be marked by a generous, inclusive, relentless delight in one another. And then people will say what a beautiful thing it is to be part of this assembly. In the words of another Charles Wesley hymn, and can it be that we should gain an interest in the Saviour's blood? Died he for us who caused his pain, for we who him to death pursued. Amazing love. How can it be that thou, our God, shouldst die for us? I realise making it us, it doesn't rhyme, but bear with me. This isn't a box to live in. It's not a way to hide from the world. It's an invitation to participate in opening our arms to all the world, to call people to come and see that the Lord is good. Come and find a seat at the table. Come and be transformed by lived experience of the love of Jesus Christ, and to carry that love into all the everyday encounters of our lives. A people marked out by the love we bear. Oh, church, let us serve the King who spent himself for us and whose name is beautiful.